Hey, I'm Brendon Payne with Century 21, the Harrelson Group, and the Brendon Payne Expert Advisors team. And today I want to give you a little bit of insight into the topic about closing costs. I get questions all the time on what are closing costs, what do they entail, what does the buyer pay, what does the seller pay? So let me give you in just a couple minute video a little bit of summary on what your closing costs are when you're buying or selling a property. Let's talk about first with the buyer. Buyer's closing costs are associated with a couple of things. First off is if they're getting a loan, then a significant portion of buyer's closing costs are wrapped up in the mortgage cost or the loan related expenses if they're getting a mortgage. If you're not using a mortgage and you're paying cash, then none of these exist. But in the loan related costs, you've usually got an application fee, might have an appraisal fee, a credit report, maybe a loan origination points, stuff like that. The important thing to remember about your loan related cost is they have to be disclosed by your lender. And so you will not go into it with any surprises. You should have a good faith estimate of what you're going to be paying in any of the loan related fees. And honestly, if you're comparing brokers and loan originators, that's the number that you want to go and compare apples to apples, because you could have a certain percentage rate on your loan, but be paying more upfront and all these fees. You have to decide what works best for you. But those loan related costs are one of those variables you really want to look at between the lenders. Second part is the title related cost. Now, in South Carolina, we are an attorney state, meaning that instead of title companies, we have attorneys that do the closing. So they're doing the title search, they're doing the title insurance, they're doing all the workup of the paperwork, and all the attorney's fees kind of get lumped into what I call your closing costs on the buyer side. So you're going to have those. If you happen to be watching this and you're not in South Carolina, then you might be a title state, which means a title company is doing the same thing that our closing attorneys do. Actually, they're very similar in costs from what I've seen from one state to the other. They just, somebody different does them. In South Carolina, we use attorneys, and in other states, they use title companies. Then you might have some miscellaneous costs on the buyer side. You might have, if you're doing a specific inspection, you might be paying for a pool inspection or maybe a roof inspection. You're going to have your recording fees. You might have some capital contributions. If you're buying in a homeowners association that requires you to put a certain amount in when you become an owner in the neighborhood, you might have that. Okay. So a lot of different things to make sure that you're aware of, because you don't want to get any surprises when you're going to the closing table or when you're saving things up. You want to have an idea of what's it going to cost me to get into this home. It's a lot of different ways that you can minimize your closing fees, and a lot of different ways where we can write contracts for you that you can kind of wrap them up into the life of the loan. So got questions, reach out to me. Let's talk about seller fees. Seller fees, you typically are going to have some form of real estate commission on there if you're working with an agent. Also, back up a little bit, as a buyer, you might be agreeing to pay some commission in the transaction. Just depends on what your individual situation is. So you could have commission on the seller side, and then you have your title costs on your side. So the title, deed preparation, working up all the paperwork, getting all of that stuff signed, courier fees, stuff like that, all kind of fall into that attorney closing costs bucket that I always refer to. And then you can have some miscellaneous costs. Sometimes neighborhoods have certificates of assessment where when you sell, you've got to pay a couple $100. I've seen them as high as $500 to be able to basically have the homeowners association say you're in good standing. And you may have a transfer tax, that we call them deed stamps in a lot of markets. That's a county recording fee that basically is money that goes to your municipality upon the transfer or the sale of a property. So, and then of course you got your recording fee or anything else that miscellaneous things that may be in there from the attorney or other inspections, things like that. Key thing to remember with all these is you shouldn't have any surprises. When I work with a seller or a buyer, The buyer is usually getting some sort of net sheet from their lender, or we can put one together with the expenses that we anticipate if they're a cash buyer. And for sure, when you're a seller, we're working with them off of a net sheet with their anticipated expenses. Can take that off of the sale price that we're looking at for a contract or where we're listing the property, and then back out any mortgage and give a nice estimate of what that seller is going to walk away with at the end of the day when everything is all said and done. Really important not to have surprises, know what's involved in the closing costs. And as always, if you have any questions, reach out to me. I'm happy to be a resource for you, explaining this stuff more in detail to you, or give you some specifics on your property and your scenario. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.